Hello and welcome back to Geek and Speak, the Geek and Seek podcast. Today, we're going to be breaking down what we think are some of the best Commander Precons, especially from the last few years. Specifically, we're going to be talking from our own experience as much as we can, talking about decks we've played, especially on our Commander gameplay series, but also just in our personal collection, what we think are some of the best Precons and why. Joined with me today is Preston. Preston, how's it going, man?
Good. Uh, had a pretty stress-free couple days, so I'm excited, energized for today's episode.
I wish I could relate. Jason, how's it going?
Going good. I know that I'm in my natural habitat currently, but I am actually at my parents' house this week, taking care of my dog, my parents' dogs. They're on vacation.
Very good, very good. Always down to see some more doggo action. And then, hi, I am your host, Morgan, and I'm fine. I'm perfectly fine. I'm happy to talk some Magic with my friends on this fine Thursday night that we are recording. So, if you would like to support the show, our gameplay series, anything else that we are doing here at Geek and Seek, you can help us out by doing all the YouTube algorithm stuff that you're supposed to do. That be hit like on the video, share it with a friend, make sure you're subscribed if you're not already, and then go check out the other 200 plus videos we have out on the channel. And then if you'd like to go a step further, you can check us out on patreon.com/geekandseek YouTube and support us that way as well. And then you could also hop in our Discord where we're talking Magic. Sometimes you get to see videos a little bit early, stuff like that. All right. Before we get into the main topic, I have a couple news things I'd like to hit up. A couple things for the channel specifically, and then a couple things that are for the broader Magic community. For our channel, we have a little survey that we're doing since Season 2 of our Commander gameplay series just ended. If you have some feedback that you'd like to give, it's like, 8 questions. It takes like a minute, 2 minutes to fill out. We'll have it pinned as the top comment of this video or in the description, so you can go fill that out if you'd like to give feedback on how you think we can improve the show going forward. And then also, MagicCon Vegas is coming up in October. Both Tommy and I are going to be there. So if you would like to sling some spells, meet us, hang out a bit, Tommy and I will be there. Should be a good time. And then we also have a channel update video coming out on Monday that's right. So if you want to hear more about what's going to change with the show and the channel in general going forward, tune in for that video. All right. And then as far as the actual broader Magic news, we have a little bit of a BNR announcement from earlier this week. Well, this week as of the recording of this. The small one that we'll get out of the way first is that All That Glitters is banned in Pauper. This is a cute little aura. It's originally from the original Eldraine set, but it got downshifted to Common in Commander Masters. And it's pretty strong. It's really good in like the bobbly kind of decks and stuff. So, Preston, you and I play a little bit of Pauper. What is do you have any opinions on the All That Glitters ban?
I mean, I don't really know the Pauper metagame all that much, but this is not a surprising ban at all. This card puts in work in every format it's legal in. I'm honestly kind of surprised it took this long for it to get banned.
Mm-hmm. And then, Jason, I don't know if you have much of an opinion on Pauper, but were you surprised at the ban, or are you just out of the loop enough with the format that you don't have much to say about it?
Well, I mean, just from the perspective of it's 2 mana, and like it can potentially end games. I feel like this could really easily end games in Pauper, just for 2 mana. I don't know. I don't play the format, but I understand why this might have needed to happen.
Context is important. A big part of it is that, you have a lot of really cheap artifact creatures and stuff, obviously, but the artifact lands are notably legal in Pauper. There's a lot of formats where the artifact lands are not legal. They are legal in Pauper, so that was a big part of it. But here's the more spicier part of the ban and restricted announcement. It's that every card that cares about stickers or attractions is now banned in Legacy and Vintage. Originally, so when they made the last unset, for those of you who don't remember, they made these couple side things that you can do, stickers, attractions. They're kind of complicated. Do your research. It would take me 5 hours to explain it to you. But they wanted some of the new unset to be commander legal, right? So they had about half the set was just unset stuff, not legal anywhere else. But then the other half of the set is like, this is legal in commander. And they specifically tried to design it to where everything was weak enough that it wouldn't affect other formats. Because currently, with the way that they do legality, is that in order to make something legal in Commander, but not legal through Standard, you have to say it's also legal in Vintage and Legacy. So the problem is that Blank Goblin is actually kind of pretty good, and it kind of messed up the whole format for, I believe it was Legacy primarily where this was a problem. And it wasn't even just a matter of, oh, I am playing this card, so now I have to have my attractions and my stickers with me. But because people sometimes run clone effects, like Phyrexian Metamorph, it's like, well, I have to just have my own attraction and stickers with me, even if I don't have them in my deck, just in case I go up against an opponent, and now I end up with their card. So they just decided to completely axe it, and all sticker and attraction-related cards are now banned in Vintage and Legacy. So 2 parts there that I want to get your guys' opinions on. One is, does this surprise you? Are you glad to see these mechanics go? And then also, well, actually, I'll make this 3 parts. 2, what do you think of the reasoning that in order to make a commander legal, they have to make it Legacy and Vintage legal as well? And then 3, shouldn't they just ban it in commander?
Yeah, this is miserable, and it infuriates me that these were ever legal anywhere outside of a draft of Unfinity.
I've never really played any of the Unfinity cards in Commander, and that's really all I play. So, but looking at this, I could just, without knowing all of the sticker cards, because I know there are a ton.
I believe there are
sticker
45
cards.
sticker sheets.
That's so
And then
many. That's too many.
I believe an attraction deck is like a side deck you have to have with you, and I believe it has to be 10 cards minimum. It's just a lot of extra crap you have to carry around.
Yeah, that just feels like too much. Just make it easy on everybody. Just ban it. Like, don't make me have to know, or like, it's too ridiculous. It's too ridiculous. These types of cards should not be legal in these formats. That's just how I feel.
So the main reason that we don't see them banned in Commander is that Commander's ban list is not run by Wizards of the Coast. There's the separate rules committee for Commander, right? Is there an argument that maybe these should never have been legal anywhere? Like maybe if they somehow ever do another unset again, they shouldn't try this?
Honestly, there have been uncards that people have actually wanted in constructed play. Wizards just chose the worst ones they've maybe ever put in an unset to make the legal ones. So I don't know. I mean, it's not impossible for you to have goofy uncards be legal. Just don't do ones that require 15 extra game pieces.
There's a couple that I guess like do make sense. The main one that I think of is I think it's called Krark's Other Thumb, where it deals with dice. Like that one is actually relevant ever since Baldur's Gate. So I think that one is one that definitely should be. I don't think that it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that it should be just because rolling dice is a lot more prevalent now. But I guess, that would, Ancient Copper Dragon.
That card shouldn't exist. That card's insane.
I guess.
Yeah, I mean, the whiff, there's a high whiff rate. Sometimes sometimes it's terrible.
But maybe that's why, maybe now that card exists, maybe that's why you can't have Krark's Other Thumb be legal, because doing that twice and just, like, taking whichever one is higher. Ugh.
Yeah. Preston, I know you're a big fan of the unsets. I've been seeing a lot of stuff. Mark Rosewater specifically, who's kind of the head guy for the unsets, he recently wrote an article kind of saying like, "Hey, it's kind of unlikely we're ever going to have another unset." What do you think that would mean for the greater Magic community? Do you think that we'd be fine? Do you think we'd be missing out on something really special? As someone who really likes the unsets, what do you think?
Well, I didn't actually care for Infinity, but I did like all the other unsets that I've like. What was the one we did?
I believe it was Unglued. It was well, I don't remember.
It's hard
The
for me
one
to
that
remember
came
all
out
of them.
before, the one that came out when we were in high school in like 2016, 2017, whenever that one came out.
Yeah, the one that had
Or as a headmaster.
contraptions and stuff.
Yeah, those were fun.
Like that one. I think that one was pretty fun. So like
Earl of Squirrel.
Yeah, there was some fun stuff like that. Actually, that is like when I was talking about people want some of those cards in constructed. Some of the legendary creatures from that set, people actually are like, I want to play this as a commander because of how much I like it. So there's a lot of fun stuff in some of those sets. So not having it isn't like the end of the world, obviously, but yeah, a little sad, I guess. It's a way for them to do silly stuff, but I guess if they're just going to do silly stuff in regular Magic, who really cares?
Which, yeah, they kind of do now, don't they? A lot of stuff is just goofy now.
What worries me is if they stop doing unsets, now are they just gonna do those like really cool unset arts for like basics? Are they just gonna do those as like secret layers and we're gonna have to pay a lot of more money for those?
Yeah.
That's the thing that worries
probably.
me.
Not Clark's third thumb.
Well, you say that, but the Unfinity basics are actually not that expensive.
But I'm saying, is that now the only way that we're going to be able to get them is in secret lair sets where we're going to have to like spend real money on basic lands? Like, is that the only way we're going to get those, or are those done
they
now?
already do that, and people buy them. Otherwise, they wouldn't keep making them.
But listen, or are they just not going to do that and they're done making them now, which now the prices of those lands are going to skyrocket? Because, I mean, if they're not making them anymore, there's definitely going to be a limited supply that is just, you're not getting any more. This is it. And they also think about what that's going to do to, like, the shock lands that got reprinted or the other things like that. Those shock lands, I could see it. I could see those shock lands, like, be getting up to, like, $100 in a couple years.
Well, especially if you want they have, like, the special foiling, right? Those are really expensive. But even then, like the ones that are like Uber, like played a lot more, like the Steam vents and stuff, I think those are like just the base versions are like $40. So, and I think that I am okay with having like a art reserve list, if that makes sense. Like say like, hey, if you want this card, here's a cheaper version for it. But if you want this really special one, then it's more rare and you'd have to spend more. I'm okay with that. I think in principle, it makes collecting special, but then it doesn't make the game less accessible, if that makes sense. So I'd be okay with that. That wouldn't bum me out too bad. All right, so let's hop into our main topic today. So we're going to be talking about the precons that we have played on our show and what we think are some of the best ones, and then some of the ones from our personal collections that we've played in the last few years. And we're going to hopefully be able to determine what some of the best precons from the last couple of years are. And this is also relevant because we've played a lot of precons the last couple of years because Wizards of the Coast has sponsored some of our episodes, and they've sent us some other product as well that even if it wasn't a specifically sponsored episode, we played with the decks anyways and got our opinions of them. So we've played a lot of precons the last couple of years. So hopefully we have a pretty good basis on what to go off of. So let's go back in the time capsule, boys, to episode number 2 of the show when we played Warhammer 40K. So what do you guys think was the strongest Warhammer precon and why?
It was definitely the Necron deck, just because the other 3 decks were kind of janky 3-color decks, and Necron was just mono black artifacts, uber value, graveyard recursion. Like, it was just so powerful. And the other 3 decks were strong. Like, they were not weak decks by any means. It's just Necron's was so good for our precon. It was kind of insane.
Yeah, I kind of felt like in that game, my deck, I played Marnius Calgar, and I felt like the entire time that my deck was just so slow. I didn't feel like I
You did
did
nothing the
anything.
first several turns.
I know it just couldn't do a whole lot, and it felt bad. But I ended up, I think I won that game, right?
You did. You did.
Yeah, I stole that win somehow. Um, and then Steven played the Necron deck, right?
And he played it again recently on the Precons Through History episode that we did. I think I agree with
I was
Preston.
I was very intimidated by that deck during that game, and I felt like that the 3-color deck that I was playing, it just, man, it just, because of how expensive the commander is and how expensive its ability is, just it was slow.
Well, Marnius Calgar is also technically the backup commander of that precon. People forget that. Um, but Marnius Calgar is awesome, so everyone just played it instead. Uh, I think that I agree that the Necron deck was probably the best, and I think it was smart for Steven to use Imantech, I believe, was one of the backup commanders, much stronger than the face commander of that precon. I think that's a good pick for one of the strongest precons. I know that Steven had the first time he played it, he had kind of a rough start because he didn't have any card draw. His curve was a little high in his starting hand, but his second showing of the deck when he played it again more recently was very good. And other than the fact that it's a mono black deck, so it's limited in certain answers and stuff, and it's an artifact deck, so it gets completely wrecked by Farewell and Vandal Blast and stuff. It's cool and it's strong. So I would agree that I think the Necron deck was the best. And I don't necessarily even mean that to crap on the other 3 decks. I thought they were all fine, but this was the first of the Universes Beyond Commander precons, and it felt like they were testing the waters. All right. So next up, we're going quite a bit forward. This was our first sponsored video, I believe. This was Commander Masters. We played the precons, not upgraded at all. This was episode 16 of our show. Tommy was playing the colorless deck, which was kind of an Eldrazi deck, but not really. Mostly just big, scary, colorless deck. I was playing Slivers. Jason was playing Planeswalkers, and Preston was playing enchantments. So, of those 4 decks, what do you guys think was the best one and why?
So
I know
for
what
that,
I know
in
which
my
one is
opinion,
not.
okay, so in my opinion, I think the enchantments one is probably the strongest. Out of the box, and also as far as upgradability, because in these colors there's already a lot of love for enchantments, and there's already a lot of really powerful enchantments. So you could change a lot of these cards and turn this deck into a bunch of different strategies. You could even do it as like a curses deck, an aura curses deck, you know. So that's what I would say, that this is probably the strongest one. Especially, it has cards like Dryad of the Elysian Grove. Like, that was in the precon. That's such a good card. So, I thought this one was the strongest. But, I think that there's an argument that the Eldrazi one has the most potential.
The Eldrazi one, I think, has the best mana base. I think our biggest gripe at the time for these decks was that all the mana bases kind of suck, which sucks because they were selling these precons for a lot more than the average precon. So the colorless deck had the best the best mana base, but it was a little. I know some people were disappointed that it was labeled as an Eldrazi deck, but it wasn't really an Eldrazi deck. It just had Eldrazi's in the deck. I know the Sliver deck is not the best because it was the worst mana base ever imaginable. So slow. Which maybe if it was a mid-range deck, maybe it wouldn't be so bad. But Slivers, they're supposed to be fast and scary. And it's not fast and scary when all my lands enter tapped. So I think the enchantment one is the best one. I think it's probably the best colors. Green and white are probably the best enchantment colors, and adding black lets you play with some fun new cards, as well as the face commander for this deck actually incentivizes you to try to close out the game, which is one of the problems with enchantment decks, is a lot of the times they just dirtle and don't win. so that the fact that the face commander says, "Hey, go attack," is pretty nice. And then the backup commanders are really good options if you want to play sagas. So that's cool as well.
Yeah, so I agree. This is for sure the best of the four. I mean, the only real issue I think this deck primarily had was that its end game was maybe not the biggest hitter of the four, but with how quickly it could stomp through the other three, it didn't really need the biggest end game uh, in a deck. So, yeah, it was pretty good, and I wish I had got a copy of it for myself back when it was around. I don't even know what the price is looking like nowadays.
I don't know. I would think that they're probably a little bit more reasonable now. I'm not sure, or you could probably just pick up the singles that you need. That actually is probably cheaper, because I know that the backup commander was going for a lot of money for a while, but yeah. All right. So the next one is the very next episode. This was the Lord of the Rings Precon episode 17 of our show. Jason, you were not in this one. Tommy was here, and we upgraded these precons, but we were limited. We only were upgrading them with cards from the main set. So if it was we weren't just grabbing whatever the heck we wanted for these upgrades. Again, here's an example of one I know for sure is not the best one. It's the Sauron deck. It doesn't know what it wants to be. It's like half Reanimator deck, half Spellslinger. The curve is incredibly high. It's very jank. So I know it's not that one. I know that one's not the best.
The elf one also for sure isn't the best. It is maybe about as weak as a Simic Precon could possibly hope to be. It was a fun deck to play, sure, but it was not strong. As for the other two...
The other two are kind of baller.
To me, I can't really pick one off the top of my head that was like way better. Like if you compare them card by card and spend a lot of time, I'm sure you could pick one out, but I feel like they're pretty close.
Did you end up watching that episode, Jason? Do you have a preference on whether the human deck or the food deck was better?
I'm always going to say this, like anytime a human precon deck comes out, I'm always going to say that the human precon deck is the strongest, because humans is just, I don't know.
It's a well-supported tribe.
What's a stronger, like merfolk maybe, as far as stronger typals? Like humans is just, it's got a lot of support. Yeah. It's got a lot of support. So, a human precon deck comes out, it's probably going to have some heat that it's going to add to other human typal decks, or, you're just going to use this classic human cards and upgrade it to make it even better. And even like there's a whole lot, because is that a green and white? I forget what colors that one is.
No, the human one from Lord of the Rings is
America colors.
White,
blue, red.
Yeah, I know it has white in it though, but like, oh wait, it's white, blue, red.
So I thought.
Oh yeah, so because it has blue in it, it's fine. So I would say probably the humans deck.
So I think the human deck is probably the best one, as if we're talking about the upgrade ability potential. Because one of the cards I added was Horn of Gondor. That card slaps. It snowballs. If you already have a decent board state, oh my god. And I believe that's what Tommy ended up using to really pull ahead there towards the end of the game. I do think that the Sam and Frodo deck, the food deck, is probably my favorite of them. It's very cool. I like that color combination. But I actually think that if you play Merry and Pippin, the backup commanders, I think the deck is actually stronger than if you have Sam and Frodo. And that feels weird from a flavor perspective, of like, here are your main characters, but they're not actually the better commanders. So I'll give it to the Eowyn deck. We'll say that the Eowyn deck was the best one. All right, so the next up is the next episode. Right after that, episode 18, we did Wilds of Eldraine. We had 2 precons in this deck. We had 2 decks that we built completely from scratch, and we had 2 decks that were slightly upgraded precons. Jason had the slightly upgraded enchantment deck. It was mostly aura base, and then Steven had the slightly upgraded fairy precon. Which of these do we think is better?
I do not remember these deck lists enough to have an opinion. I'm gonna let you
Okay.
two hash this one out.
Elevere was a lot of fun. I remember like that's a deck I haven't actually played Elevere in a while, but it's a deck that I haven't taken apart, and I probably won't take it apart ever because it's actually a really fun deck. And it's just another one of those like deck builds that there's a lot of love for already. So you could rotate a lot of cards in and out of it, and it's gonna be good, and it's gonna function well, and it's gonna be consistent, like you said.
Yeah. So maybe we should get this one out of the way right now, since we just had two enchantment decks close together. Which of these two enchantment decks was better? The more aura one, the one that Jason played, or the more recursive one that Preston played?
The one that Preston played, I think I would have to say.
I agree.
Yeah, I think that one that one is pretty nutty just out of the box, let alone what you can do with it after the fact.
Yeah, I think out of the box, definitely a lot better.
All right, so next up we had from episode 23. This was the Lost Caverns of Ixalan episode. No upgrades were done for these decks. We just played the precons out of the box. I was not in this game. I was a spectator. I was editing. Minus Tommy kind of just not doing jack diddly squat. Everyone popped off, did their thing, and we have seen the Clavileño deck is what he played. We have seen that since then. And it's very strong. He brought it back for Revenge Week. Very cool, very strong deck. He had a very, very, very bad first showing of it. I feel like all of these are decent decks. Do you guys have a
Velociraptors. It was Velociraptors. I was really excited for this set. I watched a lot of videos. It's Velociraptors. The Simic one is kind of a close second, but it's the dinosaur deck.
So, Jason, you played the pirate deck, and you still have it, and play it every now and then. Do you think it holds up to the Velociraptor, or nah?
I think that it's definitely the second strongest, if it's not the strongest, because while it is just pirates, right? The commander is so good. It's just so much fun. It's just, and honestly, it's one of those decks where, if you're not used to playing a graveyard deck, where like you're putting cards into your graveyard and playing them, it's honestly a really good intro deck to that style of play. Hang on, I want to get the deck list pulled up, because the cards that come with this for the deck are just really, really good. And I think out of the box, it's definitely the second strongest.
Yeah, I really like all four of these decks, and I am glad Pirates finally did find a commander that worked for them, because they really were struggling there ever since the first Ixalan. Like, they just didn't have an amazing option for a commander, so
yeah,
having a good one now is...
I built a deck for the OG Admiral Brass, and it was not a good deck. So it helps that we've gotten a lot more pirates since then. But then, yes, the new Admiral Brass is much, much better as a commander.
Yeah, because it's like you could do changelings with this too, and then that kind of adds a different level to it. But the fact that it brings creatures back with it just makes them bigger most of the time. Like a majority of the time, you're turning like a 2/2 pirate into a 4/4 with haste. Yeah, you have to exile it, when it leaves the battlefield. But the fact, like the value that you can get off some of the good pirates that enter. Dockside Extortionist is a pirate, everybody. I don't know if you knew that or not. I don't know if you're aware. It's a pirate. So that I just think that this is a really strong deck, even though it is kind of narrow as far as the theme. Like, you have to play pirates.
So I will say this about the Merfolk deck. The Merfolk deck was is also one of the stronger decks. Honestly, I don't think any of them suck. I think all of them are pretty decent. The Merfolk deck, though, is my least favorite just because it's a lot of counters. You're exploring a lot. It's just a lot to keep track of. I don't want to have to deal with it. But yes, I think we can say that the dinosaur deck was probably the best one. But none of these were bad. I actually really liked all of them. So next up, we have Precons through history. This was just a few episodes ago. Everyone brought back a precon from a different year of Magic. We put them up against each other. It was pretty interesting. So it really got to highlight how Commander decks have changed and how their design philosophy has changed, both in deck construction and in new card design. So it was very cool to do that episode. This was another episode I was not in. Steven brought back the Necron deck. And then Jason played one of the Doctor Who decks. Tommy played Edgar Markov, and Preston played Mizzix Mastery. Or Mizzix? Is that the commander?
The deck is called Seize Control.
Seize Control.
But
Precon.
Yeah.
So, which of these do we think is the strongest? We've already talked a little bit about the Necron deck, and everyone knows Edgar Markov is scary, but if we're just kind of talking about the precon as a base,
it's the Necron deck.
You think so?
Jason's is second place, and then it's kind of a toss-up between mine and Tommy's for third and fourth.
No, I think mine was the strongest precon. I think mine had much more synergy because it had to. You know, because of the Universes Beyond theme to it. Every single card had to be more specific, and because they were more specific, the deck was more synergized. And so I think that synergy is really kind of what propelled me to win that game.
And because it was Bant, it's Simic with board wipes. And we always joke that that's very good. You get the card advantage from blue, you get the ramp from green, you get the protection or removal from white. I think that boosts it up a lot. But I really feel like that they refined that deck a lot. And part of that is just a design decision with the Necron deck being mono black that narrowed down its ability to have better answers and stuff like that.
And here's the thing. Like, Preston, how much did you play with yours before we recorded that game?
Couple of games, I think, maybe 2 or 3.
I never even pulled mine out of the box. So, I just think from that perspective alone, the deck was just stronger out of the box than every other one that hit the table that day.
Actually, yeah, I'm re-looking at the deck. Maybe I was thinking of one of the other Doctor Who ones. This one is really powerful.
Yeah, it's nuts.
I didn't really care for the Doctor Who decks in general, but they might have the best mana bases of any precon.
The mana base in this is so efficient.
Yeah. Especially when you consider it's a 3-color deck. Because, you know, you could argue that there's like monocolor decks or 2-color decks that are like, oh, maybe they have better mana bases. Yeah, maybe. But they had really good reprint lands in the Doctor Who decks just on a value perspective. But also I think all of them were 3-color decks. And they all had solid mana bases.
Also, I'm telling you, Displacing Dinosaurs is one of the best cards out there, dude. That card is so nuts.
Yeah, so I'm okay with saying that the Doctor Who
turns a Soul Ring into a 7/7 dinosaur, guys.
It's also worth...
I don't think you understand.
It's also worth pointing out that that's the newest one. Like, I think that this was an example that the newer decks... The newer the deck was, the better it was. Like Edgar Markov.
Yes.
Very scary commander,
horrible mana base.
Terrible.
Yeah. Horrible mana base. Just god awful.
All right, and then finally, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say for Seize Control, like there's a couple of good cards in there, but it was in that period of time where the decks had 3 different things they wanted to do, and they never worked well together, almost ever. So
it was that this deck is meant to be upgraded.
Well, no, it was, here are 3 commanders. You each get a third of what you need for them to have a proper deck. Pick one and then cut the other 2 out.
I kind of like because it forces you to like try building it yourself more. So I kind of like that better. But as far as being able to open it up and play right then and there, that's not for the best for sure. So the last of the heavy Precon episodes that we did, this was the just 2 episodes ago, Outlaws of Thunder Junction. We all played slightly upgraded Precons, and we did a video that was explaining our decisions, but we said, like, you know, only keep at 10 to 15 cards we're switching now. We had to keep our upgrades in like the $30 to $50 budget. I don't think anyone did more than $35, actually. I think 35 was the most anyone spent on their upgrades. But what do you guys think was the best of these decks? Maybe outside of the box, but maybe also as far as their potential, because Tommy's commander feels like something that could be CEDH playable, just not even kind of outside of the box though. Whereas if we're just talking about consistency out of the box, I feel like maybe it was Yuma, maybe it was the desert deck. And I really did like Preston's deck. He was playing Olivia, the Outlaws deck, but it had some mana problems. It had some board wipe problems. So obviously those are really easy fixes. Like if you just want to pick up the deck and make a couple really minor fast upgrades, easy thing to fix. So maybe if we're just talking about potential on the casual level, maybe Olivia's the best one. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I don't know if I would say that, because Olivia did have Hex in it. I say did because if you watched End Step, it no longer has Hex in it.
It does not.
So I don't know if I would say that one is the most fun to play or the best one out of the box. I honestly think that if I had gotten off to a better start with mine, it would have shown off a lot more, but I do think that Tommy's was probably the best one out of the box. Just simply from the fact that, like, you know, it's 2 colors, so it's easier to manage, and I know that we only saw him get like 3 or 4 islands that game, but that's not going to happen most of the times that you play this. You know, so this deck is going to be good. He still was able to cast the alternate commander for 2 mana at one point, you know, so I just think that this deck probably needed to be considered more, because honestly, looking at this, the mana base for it is like, what's it? It's probably like a 5 or less, maybe. It's a lot of 1s and 2 drops with a couple of 6 drops scattered in there. So I think that this deck probably is the best one out of the box, just because you're going to be able to do a lot of it a lot faster than you will the other decks.
What do you think, Preston?
The Izzet one, I feel like it just didn't have as many low drops as you want in a deck like that. Like, looking at the deck list, there's not as many 1 to 2 drop spells as you usually would want, I feel like, in a spell slinger.
The main thing that Tommy added when he did his upgrades is he added more cantrips, because the base precon didn't have as many.
I mean, what I'm seeing a lot of like 2 drops, a lot of 1 drops, a lot of 3 drops, a lot of X cost spells. You know, there's Dig Through Time, but that, like, you can make that cost. You don't have to pay set.
9 mana or whatever the hell it is. It's never actually that much.
Treasure Cruise is another one that's on there. Baral's Expertise is you know, it's kind of like, it's sneaky. You know, it's not really 5 mana because you're getting to play something for free. So I think that, you know, looking at the deck list and just looking at the pips, it's a little bit deceiving, because I think a lot of the deck is really, realistically, 2 drops and 3 drops, with a few 4 drops and 6 drops scattered in there, I guess, because you'll have cards like Arcade Bombardment and Shark Typhoon.
I am willing to agree with Jason that the Stella Lee might be the best commander if we're just talking about potential. I really do think that the Izzet commander is bordering on CEDH playable.
Yeah, you take this out and you give it the ability to untap, and now you're talking. So
I'd be willing to agree.
You cast this on an extra turn spell?
Good fair magic, as Richard Garfield intended. Just lock your opponent out of the game. Actually, that is what he intended. He literally did that. The Time Walk is such an old magic card.
Is it good fair magic? Yeah, good luck. Good luck, pal.
All right, so we had a few other precons on the show that they weren't in precon specific episodes, and we thought that maybe these were worth touching up on just a few. I'm going to go ahead and knock these first few out real quick because these were Tommy's decks and he's not here to defend them, but I figured we could talk through these real quick, maybe figure out which one of these we could maybe consider. So first off, there's Strafon. This is another vampire deck. He really likes vampire decks. This was in both episode 3 and episode 21 of our show. I believe that was I don't even remember what episode 21 was. That actually doesn't sound right. It was episode 13 that he played Strafon. It was the plane chase episode. And then there's also Galea, which was in the Voltron episode. It's Bant. It's from the Dungeons and Dragons set. And then there's also Urza, Lord High Artificer, which he played on the Artifact episode, which was episode 28. So, I think out of the box, the Urza deck is insane. I actually think that Urza is one of the best Artifact builds if you want to go aggressive. But the other two I don't think have a chance in the running. I think Galea, as far as Voltron goes, is one of the weaker options, which is too bad because it's a good color combination for Voltron. I just feel like the deck is not that great. I feel like Galea is a man commander. And then I feel like Strafon is like, he wants you to play big vampires, which is fine, but why play the big beefy vampires when you could play the small vampires and just play Edgar Markov, which is a much more efficient deck, so... But I will say that Urza is actually insane. I think that is a very strong deck. I used to have that precon too. It's very good.
Honestly, I don't think that there's really a whole lot to say about those three. Like, other than what you just said, Urza is definitely the strongest one. And to your whole point about Edgar Markov and Strafon, that's literally what Tommy did.
Yeah.
So...
I think you're not giving Galea quite enough credit. Like, if you do upgrade that with all of the really good artifacts and equipments, I do think she is actually really powerful, but out of the box, the deck list isn't amazing. It's fine, I feel like, and she's kind of boring. Like, I don't think she's interesting as
out
one
of
of
all
those
the other
options.
Voltron options that exist.
But I actually think she's one of the stronger ones, since she just lets you do stuff for free and off the top of your deck, so you always have an extra card in your hand. But Strafon's pretty bad. I am glad Tommy has finally got the Edgar. I'm so happy for him.
And then the last precon that has been on the show that we want to talk about is Gimbal, which was also in the Artifact episode. This was from March of the Machine. It cares about making different artifacts with different artifact tokens with different names. This is Jason's deck that he played. And he upgraded it a decent amount, but I'll kind of let him... Why don't you just talk to the people a little bit about this deck?
So, originally I bought this deck because there was a point in time where we were, deciding what themes we wanted to do, and one of the themes was, we're all going to play precon decks. And I was like, okay, well, I want to play a fun precon. I don't want to play a standard one that everybody's seen before, like, I don't want to just... bust out not like to call out Tommy on that, because he'd been planning on getting Edgar Markov for a bit because he liked vampire decks, and he had a couple vampire decks already at that point. So Edgar Markov was already something for him, but I wanted to try and get something that was unheard of and make it a little bit more interesting of a game. So I went with Gimbal, and I didn't really want Gimbal. I didn't want to go into that game necessarily blind, but also I bought Gimbal at the game store with my brother-in-law and a couple other friends, and we kind of just were there to play games already. So I kind of just busted it out as a precon and just played it a couple times, and it almost won the first game, and then it did win the second game. And I think I've talked about it a little bit before, winning that second game against two decks that, my brother-in-law and my other friend had been playing for a couple years and kind of put a lot of time into, and this deck just out of the box was able to win against them. I was like, okay, there's a lot of potential in this. So I actually just turned it into a regular deck that I played. I ended up upgrading it, played it for a different episode of the show. But honestly, it's the most fun I've had playing a Precon deck out of any of the Precons I've played on the show or in like my regular life. It is the most fun that I've ever played with Precons.
That's so interesting because I remember people were poo-pooing on Gimbal when he was released because he's from Kaladesh and there's no energy support, which just feels bad. And then also like the reprint value in the deck was really bad. But it had Plane Chase, and I really like Plane Chase, and I actually think he's a sick commander. I think he's really fun. So do you think the fun translates to the power, or do you think it's kind of meh as far as power level goes? Do you think it could compete with some of these other decks we're talking about as some of the best ones, or do you think it's...
I think out of the box, like, because it has green in it, that's what really kind of makes it better as a deck out of the box, is because you're going to get those ramp cards, you're going to get more lands onto the battlefield, you're going to be able to keep yourself, within reach of the mana bases of the other constructed decks that you're playing, or some of the mana bases of the newer Precons, if we're comparing just the Precons. So because of that, I think that it really would have a good chance against a lot of different Precons that we've seen or that we've talked about today. I think it could hold its own. I wouldn't just look at it at a table of, 4 Precon decks and be like, well, that's going to be one of the first ones that loses. No, I wouldn't say that at all.
All right. Okay, so now we are going to talk about a few Precons in our personal collection that have not been on the show, but are at least worth mentioning as Precons we know are decent. So we will each go through our few, and then we will take our own personal pick on which one of those we think are best. So I'll go ahead and start us off. So I played the Azorius Vehicles Commander from Neon Dynasty, and I know Shorakai is the backup commander, but everyone likes Shorakai because it's insane and it's strong and it's it's a Gundam. It's cool. That deck is insane. I took it apart. I have a new vehicles deck that I'm building right now, and I have Shorakai in the 99. But I feel like that deck was just really good. Another one I played is Eldraine. Eldraine, I had that Precon back in Commander 2017. Mana base was very reminiscent of Slivers. It was very bad. It even had stuff like Armillary Sphere and stuff. Like, it was kind of sus. But it was a deck that once it got going, it was hard to stop. Because, big scary dragons. And then Osgir, the Reconstructor. It's from the Strixhaven Commander set. Commander 2020, I believe. And it's a red-white artifact reanimator kind of deck. My favorite Boros Commander for sure. And one of my favorite artifact decks. So I end up playing it a decent amount still. Next up is Prosper, which is from the D&D set. Black-red, play stuff from exile, get value. Everyone knows Prosper's insane. It's kind of ridiculous. So I think of these decks, though, the only one that I'm not sure if it's up there is probably Eldraine. Just because Eldraine is just going to reduce the cost of your dragons. And if you do cast it, it's probably going to smack face and kill someone. But that's really dependent on your 99, I think, more than the commander. So I think it's hard to base. And I don't think that Precon is the best out of the box. So I'm going to say no on the Eldraine for one of those, for it being the strongest of these couple decks I'm talking about. I think between a balance of the upgradability of the commander as well as how it plays out of the box, I think I'm going to go with Osgir the Reconstructor. Maybe Prosper should be the right pick, the actual pick, because Prosper is kind of insane. It goes out of control. But Osgir, you're going to be able to abuse a lot of ridiculous things. Commander players aren't running enough graveyard hate, so you're going to get to abuse that. And it's also just a really fun artifact color combination, and it's really good. The Precon was really good, and I've upgraded it a lot, and it's even better. So I would say probably Osgir is the best of those. So, Jason, why don't you go ahead and talk to us about the couple other precons you have experience with?
Yeah, so mainly the other precons that I have experience playing are the Commander 2020 precons. The main one that I played a good amount of was the Gavi. I don't know if how do you the Gavi Nest Warden deck. Um, it's a cycling deck that it's pretty good. There's definitely a lot of upgradability to it because there's other cycling cards throughout Magic history that just make the deck better. But straight out of the box, it's actually really good as a cycling deck, and it introduced a lot of cards to the game that now get played. Excuse me, that now get played a lot. The main one being, Fierce Guardianship, that was in that precon, and that's like one of the staple counter spells that go into any CEDH deck. But then it also gave us cards like Surly Badgesaur, which is an all-star card in discard decks. Like decks where you're discarding cards, and cycling is one of those themes where you're discarding. It's just going to be a powerhouse. It's going to do a lot for you. So I think that was a really strong deck. The other one was Xyrus, the Writhing Storm, and this is actually the second commander from the Calamax deck. But I had a lot more fun playing with that one because I played it as a wheels deck and a tokens deck. So that was a lot of fun. Oh, that one thing I want to say about the Gavi Nest Warden deck is the backup commander for it. I need to look at the name again.
I believe it's Xyrus.
Akim. No,
wait, no. The backup for the Gavi deck was
Akim, the Soaring Wind.
Shabraz, wasn't it?
Well, that was like the backup partner pair.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was like you could do that, but like the actual backup commander in it was like I think you say it's Akim, the Soaring Wind, and it's 3/4 with flying. It's a legendary bird dinosaur, and this is one where you would have to you would build another deck around it because there's not cards in this that would synergize to it. So I guess maybe if you were going to run a different commander with this same deck list, you would probably run Browlin and Shabraz. But this is whenever you create one or more tokens for the first time each turn, create a 1/1 white bird creature token with flying. But then it has an activated ability for 3 and... oh, God.
3 white creature tokens you control gain double strike until end of turn.
I was trying to think of the name. What is that called? What is blue, red, white? That's not Jeskai, is it?
Yeah, it's Jeskai.
Wow. Okay, so I did know it. So yeah, creature tokens getting double strike. That's kind of nuts. You play like a Desolation Twin in a deck like this.
I forgot about this card. Yeah, this one that's a cool one.
Yeah, so I thought that deck. All of these decks are really good, by the way. I think that this is probably one of the strongest Commander Precon releases that we've ever had in the history of Commander. And then the other one that I played outside of Xyrus was Zaxara. Zaxara is the Hydra's commander, but it's not necessarily Hydras. It's more X-cost spells. You don't necessarily have to build it around Hydras. You will incidentally be playing Hydras because Zaxara will make Hydras when you play X-cost spells. But the thing about this one is you can go infinite with, oh god, I forget what the enchantment is, but basically there's an enchantment, and I'll have it up on screen. But there's an enchantment where you can pay 1 blue mana to untap the creature that's enchanted, and Zaxara makes 2 mana. So, bada bing, bada boom, infinite mana. And it's infinite mana of any color you want, because Zaxara makes any color. You just have to make, is it?
It'll be infinite blue mana that you make, I think.
Infinite blue, because you have to keep making both of them blue to activate the thing. But then, something like a Chromatic Orrery.
And if you're playing an X spell deck, then you could just dump your infinite mana into something.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why it's really powerful. But I did play it as a Hydra's deck, and it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed playing that, but I don't have it anymore. I don't have any of these decks anymore because I got tired of them. I honestly, they're really good for what they did, and I would win a lot with them. And just the cards that we got out of these were really, really powerful. Like I already talked about Fierce Guardianship, but then if you look at the Calamax deck, the one where I played Xyrus, the Writhing Storm, that had Deflecting Swat in it, which is just another staple card in
All of those
CEDH
free
now.
spells, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. And then Preston, what other well, actually, sorry. Jason, of those decks, which one do you think is the best?
Probably the Calamax deck. Yeah, because while Gavi has a lot of synergy out of the box and there's a lot of really cool potential in that deck, I think that out of the box just Calamax's colors are just better overall. The color combination is better. Simic with red, just it's gonna be really good. You know, you can get all the lands onto the battlefield that you need, and then now you're just putting a bunch of +1/+1 counters on Calamax because you're casting spells and doing a lot of damage to people, and it's just that deck is really, really good. Even though I didn't play it as Calamax, I played the backup commander. That deck was probably still the strongest out of the box.
All right. So, at least for me, before we started our series, it has been years since I really picked up Precons to actually play as Precons. Like, sometimes I'd pick some of them up just for like the pieces or something in them, or I would make like a lot of upgrades to them. So, all of mine are like the really old ones. So, like, I have the three from the Edgar Markov and Dragon ones, that and the cat one. So I played all those ones. The cat one was the strongest just because the other two had old precon mana bases and there were three or more colors, so not the best. So those three I had back in the day, but the other three I had that I think were a lot more interesting and powerful, even with some of those old uh, problems, were Nature's Vengeance, which was the Lord Windgrace deck, who is pretty busted. I don't have him around anymore, but he is a very strong card, and besides maybe throwing some better board wipes into the deck, it's pretty playable out of the box even nowadays. I feel like, like it has plenty of lands to do its landfall stuff. Plenty of great cards in it, like that to take advantage, like Avenger of Zendikar and stuff. So you got all the land stuff you could ever want with the deck. So that one holds up pretty decently, all things considered. And then the other two were Exquisite Invention, which was the Saheeli the Gifted deck, another Planeswalker. She was all about artifacts. That's where Treasure Nabber comes from, I think, and a couple other really good ones. Just an Izzet artifact deck, pretty strong, pretty standard, but pretty playable out of the box. And then finally there was Mystic Intellect. It was a sort of spell recursion deck that focused on like flashback spells mostly, and trying to cast a lot of non-creature spells with some prowess creatures. I primarily played it with Elsha of the Infinite, the backup commander who had prowess and lets you cast stuff on the top of the library, pull a bit of a Jason, keep looking at it. So that's always fun. But it that yep, I was gonna say that was the first dark side, so there's got a couple pretty good cards in there as well, but of those three, I have to give it to the Windgrace deck. Like that deck is just insane even before you start upgrading, and once you do start upgrading, disgust.
Yeah, if I had to pick a precon deck that I would say is the best, I would definitely I couldn't do it like right now. I don't know that I could. There's just so many that are good, but I would circle back to the Lord Windgrace precon a couple times because it's just so powerful at the box.
I think the Planeswalker commanders are usually a little on the weaker side, but Lord Windgrace specifically gives you so much immediate value, and the landfall, land recursion package is strong enough on its own that even if, God forbid you're just having a bad day and can't keep Lord Windgrace on the battlefield for more than a turn, the deck's still going to function. But if Lord Windgrace does get to stick around, insane.
And that's the thing about Windgrace. People don't usually target him as much, at least they used to not to when he was first out, because his ultimate's not that good. Like, blowing up 6 things and getting 6 2/2s is not nothing, but it's, of all of the Planeswalkers that you can run, it's not the scariest by far. but his +1 and -3 are just so much value,
Yeah, honestly,
and you
typically
can cast him forever.
what I see with planeswalkers that are really good to run as commanders, or even really good to run in commander, you like most of the time you don't run them for their ultimate. You run them because their second or first ability is just really, really OP. Occasionally, you'll get those Liliana of the Dreadhorde or Liliana Dreadhorde General, excuse me. You'll get those ones where their ultimate is like, if I could do that, that would be so cool. But most of the
Every
time, you're
line on
just
the
getting,
card is good.
yeah, exactly. So Lord Windgrace is really, really it's a good commander. And I was gonna say this about the Planeswalker precon that I played in Commander Masters, and this goes with precon decks in general, like, or excuse me, Planeswalker decks in general. They're gonna last longer than most of the other decks in the game because since the strategy is planeswalkers, you're just innately gonna lose life at a slower rate than everybody else at the table. Because everybody's attacking your planeswalkers and not you. And if they are attacking you and not your planeswalkers, then your planeswalkers are generating a crazy amount of value, and you're gonna go like you're gonna in a couple turns you're gonna ultimate 3 planeswalkers, and no one's gonna be able to stop you from winning the game at that point. So they have to attack your planeswalkers. So that's why if you're playing a planeswalker commander deck, you're probably gonna be in the late game most of the time.
Yeah. So we have come to the end of the episode where we now have to decide what we think, in our own experience at least, might be the best commander precon, at least from the last few years. I feel like it might be the Velociraptor deck. Maybe. Because the commander is so strong. Dinosaurs are aggressive. They're big, beefy monsters, which people like in commander, just on the sense of, oh, let's have some fun. People like that. But it ends games. You get these big creatures. People can't attack through you, but you can attack through them. And it's green, so you're ramping. It's white, so you got the even if not in the box, the upgrade potential of extra protection, better board wipes. It might be that one of the decks that we talked about today. That might be my pick for the best. Second would be Necrons, just for it's mono black, so it's very consistent. Graveyard decks are usually can get away a while in Commander because outside of Farewell, people don't really play a lot of Graveyard hate in Commander. So Necron might be my second pick.
I'm gonna have to go with Windgrace if I'm being honest with you. I mean, just the more I think about it, and maybe this is wrong because as the precon decks have progressed throughout the years, the mana bases have just improved more and more. But I think because of Windgrace's ability, you're still going to be consistent on mana in most games that you play, just from how the deck is going to be, just from how the deck plays out normally. And then when you upgrade the deck, all lands decks just are insane to deal with at tables. So if I had to pick the best one, I might have to say Lord Windgrace instead. But honestly, I'm a little bit biased to Gimbal. I really like that. Um, Objectively, though, I probably would have to say Windgrace.
I mean, a lot of the ones we talked about are all, I think, definitely in the discussion. But man, Velociraptor, like, it literally gives you big creatures and ramping as the two themes of the deck. It's just so good. It's a deck with 41 creatures in the deck list, and it's playable. That's insane. It's so good. I think just because things have gotten a little power crept, I'll give it the slight edge over Windgrace, but I do think Windgrace has maintained a good level of power even all these years later, which you really can't say about most of the decks that came out around that time. Like most of those decks are like the commander might be good, there might be 3 to 4 good cards in it, but otherwise are pretty bad. Windgrace has definitely maintained the test over time.
All right, I will change my answer to Windgrace being my number 2 pick, because I'm looking at the actual deck list right now for the out of the box list, and there's some like just janky old cards that just don't hold up anymore. But a lot of the deck out of the box would function. It would be okay. You would be able to play some Magic. And like I said with the Necron deck, that outside of Farewell, people don't play a lot of Graveyard Hate and Commander. This is also a Graveyard deck. And I think it's doing a thing that, when you consider upgrade potential, is probably better than the Necron deck. So
Though I do want to give a shout out to Gimbal. If you're asking which deck is best for its price, if you go buy the Precon, it's definitely Gimbal. Gimbal is less than $20 on a TCG player. So if you
nice.
want to go pick one of these up, go grab yourself the Gimbal deck.
It's so much fun. You won't regret it, I promise you.
And then you'll get a pretty little plane chase dice.
And play more Plane Chase. Play more Plane Chase.
Why don't we play more
It's fun.
plane chase, guys? It's so fun.
Well,
We
nobody
gotta do
ever
that.
brings the Plane Chase cards.
I brought him with me when we went over to your sister's place the other day.
Oh, well, I showed up really late to that.
You did show up.
Hey, also, side note, we did kind of forget the live stream where we all played the Fallout Precons.
Well, do we want to give those a shout out real quick too?
I don't
Those
think
decks
that
are
any
good,
of them
but they're
are
not in the
better.
discussion.
I don't think they're better than Windgrace. I think the only one that could be close is Mothman.
Mothman's kind of
Mothman is really strong.
Yeah, but other than that, I don't think that any of them are better than Windgrace. But the rad counters is really, really good and really strong. And one, I want to mention this card just because I want more people to know about it, because I don't want the price to spike, but I just want more people to know about this card. Strong back. That card is really strong. Pun intended.
So I think that both the Mothman deck and then the Dogmeat deck, I think, are both very, very good. I think the other two decks, while they can hold their own, they're just nowhere near as good. And I actually
They have
feel
reprints
like,
that we needed.
yeah, that's for sure. I actually think that the worst one is definitely Dr. Madison Lee. That's definitely the worst one,
sure.
because it's kind of like the old school problem with Precons, is that it's like, oh, it's kind of this, but it's also kind of this. Take your pick. They don't really go that well together. So, it's kind of artifact deck. It's kind of energy deck. And there's definitely some overlap, and a lot of the overlap is filled in with a lot of the new cards that they made for the deck. It just didn't stand up. It wasn't pushed enough. So that was too bad. And then the Mardu one, it's just kind of boring. It's fine. It's combat-y, kind of token-y. It's fine. But Mothman is absurd. I am very impressed with rad counters. I think that the Mothman is probably the best of the Fallout decks. But special shout out to Dogmeat as well.
Mothman is the best because it's trying to win at 3 different things, but they don't get in each other's way like other decks do. It's mill, it's self-mill, and it's getting your creatures huge.
Yeah. And you're playing, you just built a new deck with one of the cards that's in the 99 of that, right?
Yeah, strong.
Oh, yeah.
It's a very good deck from what I've gotten so far. Haven't gotten a win yet, but I've become arch enemy pretty quickly with it. So,
well, guys, hope you liked our discussion today about what we think are some of the best Precons in our own experience. But let us know in the comments what you guys think about what we talked about today. And then if there's any that we missed, let us know. Or if your experience is just different, like, did you have a deck that you were like, hey, that was way better than I thought, or way worse than I thought? Let us know in the comments. And then tune in next week. Next week, we are kind of having a similar conversation, which is just the best decks in our play group. So there might be a little bit of repeat. There might be a few of these commanders that we have to talk about again. But we're going to talk about what are the best decks in our play group. So if that's of interest to you, make sure you're subscribed if you are not already. And then tune in next week, hit like, all that YouTube-y stuff, and we will see you guys later. Bye.